Hey everybody, welcome to the very first or the inaugural Shop Talk. I'm your host, Chief Walther. I'm the Chief of Police for the Scottsdale Police Department, and I'm excited to have you here today, along with my co-host, Sergeant Kevin Kwan of the new Community Engagement Section. Kevin, do you want to give a shout out and say hi?
How's it going?
Great. We're, I tell you what, Kevin and I have been talking about this for a long time. Really excited to be here, and this is the first podcast from the Scottsdale Police Department, actually in the history of the Scottsdale Police Department. And really, we have a goal here, which is to continue to really connect with the community and get questions and bring on some spectacular guests to really talk about the Scottsdale Police Department, interaction with the Scottsdale Police Department, interaction with our community, and then the guests will bring on their connection to Scottsdale, the Scottsdale Police Department. So we're really excited for this very first now monthly podcast that Sergeant Kwan and I are going to do. So we're really excited to get rolling with this.
Yeah, it's exactly right, Chief. We're going to be answering questions directly from the community that we get in from our social media platforms, as well as having a guest each month to kind of tell us why Scottsdale is the best place to work and why people live here. What's so great about it? Yeah,
it's awesome. So we're really looking forward to that. And our first guest for this very first podcast, I'm excited when she rolls in and gets to start talking. But Councilwoman Tammy Caputi with Scottsdale City Council is going to be our very first inaugural guest, and so we're very pleased to have her on the show here in a little while, and excited that she agreed to be kind of our first guinea pig on our first podcast.
Right, and if you have any questions or comments for the Chief, just go ahead and send us a DM. On any one of our social media platforms that are listed below. But Chief, before we get into the community questions, I think the public wants to know a little bit about you, who you are, where you came from, where did you start, and what brought you into law enforcement?
Well, I'm really not that interesting, but I came to Scottsdale PD in 1994. I got hired as a patrol officer. Over the next 24 years, I had a great career here. Scottsdale is an incredible place. The police department's a great organization, and I was really blessed to work here for 24 years. I started out as a patrol officer, then became a detective, and after that I became a road sergeant, and then a detective sergeant, and an internal affairs sergeant. Then I got promoted to lieutenant. During my time as lieutenant, I was a road lieutenant, training section lieutenant for a period of time before I got promoted to district commander, the McKellips district commander for about 3 years, and then the downtown district commander, which downtown is an exciting place to be.
Absolutely.
And so I was a downtown commander for a while, and then I got promoted to assistant chief. I was the assistant chief over the Uniform Services Bureau, which is all of patrol and special operations. And I was the assistant chief for about 4.5 years when my wife said, "Hey, our kids are all grown and out and doing great things with their lives, and some married, some kids, all finished school, great jobs, bought their own homes." And she said, let's get out. Let's get out of law enforcement. Let's get out of the Valley. And so I let Chief Rodbell know that, hey, I'm going to retire. And he said, "What do you mean you're going to retire?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to ride off into the sunset for a while." And so my wife and I, 2 months after I retired, my wife and I moved out of the Valley and moved up to the great tiny town of Alpine, Arizona, where I became a volunteer firefighter and went to wildland fire school, went to chainsaw school and learned how to cut down trees, smoldering trees. And it was great. I went on wildfires around the state last fire season. I was on the bushfire and a couple of fires up in the White Mountains, and so had a great time.
So it's kind of funny that you would go into retirement and go and be a firefighter. I mean, it's kind of the opposite of what you did for your entire 24 years. What drew you to that?
Well, police work is hard work. So I wanted to do something that was a little bit more laid back in my retirement profession. And so that's what I give my fire brethren a lot of grief about that. I wanted a great retirement job when I went to the fire station, that I could sit in a really nice leather recliner, play video games, eat, and every once in a while go on a call. So it was
but
great.
Those calls are incredibly important because wildfires could go really, really quickly. And
yes, yeah, but so that's the wildfire side was a little different than some of the other things that we did. I drove the ambulance or the rescue a lot, so I had a great time. It really replaced some of the lost camaraderie I had when I left my police career.
Sure, absolutely.
When Chief Rodbell retired or was getting ready to retire, I got a phone call from our city manager Jim Thompson. He said, "Hey, I need you," and I said, "Great. Well, you need me to what? To come back and do a speech or a plaque presentation for Chief Rodbell's retirement?" And he said, "No, I need you to come back and be the chief."
So that's a huge transition. Now you're fighting fires, you're using chainsaws on trees and cutting them down. And
it was a big transition, but I got to tell you, I was so blown away, honored by him calling me more than 2 years after I retired and asked me to come back to be the chief. And how could I say no? I love Scottsdale. I love the police department. I love our citizens, our residents, our business owners, the visitors that we come here. Scottsdale is an incredibly vibrant place to be. And so when you're asked to come back and be the chief, how do you say no? And that's what my wife and I talked about is how do you say no? So I came back.
And coming back into the Valley, I mean, you're coming into a more fast-paced environment. How have you done with that transition?
Most of the time, pretty well. Some of the time, it gets pretty exhausting. But, had really only planned, Jim and I talked about, I told him I'd be interested in coming back in an interim capacity. But as I got into it and we really started to hit the ground running, and I think we'll talk about that here in the show, 3 months into it, he said, "Hey, would you stay?" And how could I say no? Just some great people and have some really great relationships in the city with city council, with city leadership, with the people, and hence why Tammy's here.
So that's a perfect transition. Let's get into a little bit of the questions from the community. Our very first question. Now, you talked about being here for 24 years, and Chief Rodbell was your chief at that time. And now that our city manager asked you to come back, what are some of the programs that you have implemented that you felt were critical at this moment in time and that are going to relate to our future?
Yeah, great question. And thanks for the community, again, putting forward some of these questions because I think it really speaks to those things that are on their minds. And so we got a lot of great things going on in the organization. And Chief Rodbell did some amazing work here over the 17 and a half years that he was the chief. But when you find yourself now sitting in the chief's chair, I think it's good every once in a while to have some new vision or new direction, or because you come in with new and fresh ideas.
Sure.
And so for us, there's one of the big things for me is really about communication, both internal to the organization and external to the organization. So that is really the footprint that we're moving forward with. This is a great example of that, a podcast out to connect with the community, to bring in questions, to bring in great guests, and have conversation about policing today in Scottsdale. And so what we call the PIO office, in fact, we often introduce you as Sergeant Kwan, the sergeant of the Public Information Office. That moniker is changing and has changed now. You're now the sergeant of the Community Engagement section.
Right.
Which is an expanded role. And you've done some incredible work already in really fostering a greater communication on all of our social media platforms, which is really one of the goals. Internal communication for me via every other month I'm doing a Chief Talk video, and then opposite months I'm doing an Ask the Chief, 30-minute Ask the Chief, where our employees can log into a virtual meeting and ask me questions live. And so we've gotten so much great feedback from doing that. And then this is the latest iteration of that in terms of a podcast. So it's really about just enhanced communication internal to the organization and external to the organization via our community engagement section. And then a couple others that are really big in terms of what our public expects from us. One of them is the new crisis response team,
right? Correct.
Which is about really how we respond to people in mental health crisis. We have our police crisis intervention service, which is master's level counselors that we've had inside the Scottsdale Police Department since 1975. I mean, talk about being way ahead of the game. They're an amazing group. And then we have the other component of that is we have the crisis intervention team training that we kick out, and we've kicked out to 140 plus of our officers. That really sets the standard for the type of training you need to deal with people who are in mental health crisis. Now, the crisis response team that we just created and just started to roll out is a sergeant and 4 detectives that will really have the lion's share of our emergency committals and follow up on mental health related calls. It's really, I call it 3 legs to a stool, and it's going to be I really believe it's going to be the model for how law enforcement agencies respond to our folks in mental health crisis. So that's really big.
So you talk about the model. Where did that come from? Has there been an influx of calls for service that we've seen in the department, or where does that stem?
Yeah, so we get literally thousands of calls of service per year related to folks that are in mental health crisis. And so we looked at around the valley and around the country in terms of did we have the right footprint for best practices? And so we realized that we did in a lot of areas, but there was still room for improvement for us. And so we really connect with our partners in the Valley, be it Phoenix PD, Mesa PD, Chandler, Gilbert, Paradise Valley, Tempe. We really connect very well with our partners in the Valley and to look at what best practices are. And you'll see that many of the police agencies have one component or two components. And we thought, okay, we can add a third component to this to really ramp up our game and respond appropriately. Let's be honest. In today's world, there are a lot of people who will say, well, police departments, they shouldn't have to respond to X, Y, or Z. Well, the reality is in our society is that we've made law enforcement the go-to.
Sure, absolutely.
When there is a problem, let's call the police and see if we can't figure out. So we have to evolve and make ourselves the experts in a lot of these areas.
Yeah, it's a perfect example, especially when you don't know what's going to come any day when you're on patrol. The different people that you encounter in the different calls, it's just constantly going. So let's go ahead with our second question. This kind of relates to what you just talked about. Community member wants to know, are you providing free Narcan and training to every Scottsdale resident so that they can assist all unhoused people or people experiencing the state of homelessness or mental crisis or overdosing?
We are not providing Narcan or training to the citizenry per se. We have a great program that we started years ago where we provide Narcan and training to our officers, and the number of lives that we've saved has been significant in being that initial responder. But there are a couple of reasons why we wouldn't provide that Narcan and the training to our citizenry. There's a lot of liability around that, around administering what is essentially a drug. And so we wouldn't take that liability onto the police department for that level of training, nor in terms of the expense. Narcan, it's not cheap, and think about what that would cost us in a city of 265,000 people. Even if you got 10,000 people who raised their hands and said, I want to do that, it'd be significant expense to the police department and to the city. So what I would recommend, there are those private agencies out there that will provide training. They won't provide the Narcan themselves, but they will provide some training to that. But my recommendation is to call our Police Crisis Intervention Service, and they can provide some community resources that might help, and I actually have their number handy.
Yeah, what's that number?
It's 480-312-5055. If you have questions related to that or need community services or want to get pointed in the right direction, they're really our go-to folks.
Now, Chief, is that a 24/7 manned telephone system, or how does that work?
We have police crisis intervention folks that work a fairly normal schedule, and then when we get into the nighttime hours, then they're on call, or the later nighttime hours, they're on call into the wee hours of the morning. So if you want Narcan or this, you want this training, call them during day hours. If you're in crisis, then call us and we'll get police crisis intervention services out to you.
Absolutely perfect. What steps will you take to help make sure that officer-involved shootings has been a major topic throughout the country over the last few years? What steps are you taking related to that, related to use of force cases that we have that they get reviewed by a civilian board? It seems to be a little bit of the push going on right now.
Yeah, it's huge. There was a bill in the state legislature this year related to officer-involved shootings and greater investigations. And in fact, I'll talk about that here momentarily as the second part of my answer. The first part of my answer here in Scottsdale with the Scottsdale Police Department is that we already have citizens on our use of force review board, our major incident review board, our vehicle operations review board, which is really about our emergency vehicle operations review board, which is exactly about that: emergency vehicle operations pursuits, failure to yields, collisions involving a police vehicle that is driving code 3 or emergency lights and siren, and then a safe side board, which is about injury. So we have civilian representation on each and every one of those boards. In fact, our use of force review board has 3 citizens on it. Our major incident review board has 4 citizens on it, and our vehicle operations review board has 3 citizens on it. So we have that citizen participation in the review process. They are equal voting members with my subject matter experts, because usually major incident and use of force, we bring in subject matter experts, use of force, defensive tactics, firearms, etc., and legal counsel onto those review boards. So we have that already, which is great, and we've had that for a number of all of those citizens go through a certain amount of training to understand what our policies and procedures are and how we do. Now, officer-involved shootings, moving beyond that, is I sit on a small group of chiefs in the Valley as we work toward what does a good, fair, and impartial investigation look like, and what do our citizens expect from us in
Absolutely,
that?
yeah.
And so what we see through survey after survey is that our citizens believe that the police department involved in the shooting, Scottsdale Police Department is involved in an officer-involved shooting, that we should not be investigating our own shooting, that an outside agency should be investigating that. We agree. And so we're in the process of putting together, hopefully, what will be an Arizona Bureau of Investigation, a state-run agency, probably in the next 2 or 3 years, something like that, that we're very interested in. In the meantime, what we're working on now collaboratively is putting together an East Valley task force, critical incident response team or task force to investigate one another's officer-involved shootings. So we're at kind of the beginning of that right now.
Right, and that gives a little bit of the impartiality from a different agency coming in that are not vested in, say, their coworkers, right? I mean, that gives a little bit more of fairness to it.
Yes. If you bring in an outside agency or a collaborative effort of detectives from multiple outside agencies, now they're investigating our officer-involved shooting, or we are on a East Valley team that now we're investigating an officer-involved shooting in Mesa. So that brings, I think, a greater degree of transparency to it when you bring outside or uninvolved third parties into.
And at the end of the day, through the entire investigation, it will still go to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office for the decision on whether they file charges or handle the case.
Yes,
so
that's correct.
It's a second component that we're kind of intervening in to begin with.
Absolutely. Great point, Kevin, is because you'll wind up then have a third party do the investigation, or multiple third parties as a collaborative investigative body. And then you'll have another third party in the Maricopa County Attorney's Office review those findings in that investigation. So it really, I think, creates a greater degree of transparency.
So I can transition into our next question, which is going to be a good one for you to kind of address. The person kind of states, hey, there's a growing concern across the nation of police enforcement of, they determine, of unconstitutional laws. How does the Scottsdale PD plan to deal with these such future?
I love tough questions, and this one I view as almost a slippery slope, because I got a lot of, when I took over as the chief on December 1st, and if you remember, we just again hit the height of the pandemic in December and January, and I got a lot of questions about enforcing what people believed was unconstitutional mask mandates during the pandemic.
Right.
And I shared with them that those were not unconstitutional, that the governor can have an executive emergency order that dealt with masks and mask mandates, and that had the force of law, and we could enforce that. Now, obviously in the city and in the police department, we want to take a more hands-off approach to that in terms of how we respond. And when we did respond, it was education, an opportunity to educate, and that private businesses could have mask mandates, that the governor's executive orders were completely legal and appropriate. And so really we have to look at what is the meaning of an unconstitutional law. And so obviously police officers in the Valley and in the state, they raise their hands and they offer an oath to uphold the Constitution, which we are obviously huge fans of. It's an incredible document. So we will not enforce unconstitutional laws, but we all have to come to, have a discussion about, because people will say, well, that law is unconstitutional. Well, it's really not. And so there has to be a greater consensus and understanding of the Constitution and what is constitutionally protected and what's unconstitutional.
Right. So the actual determination of an unconstitutional law would be from the judicial branch.
Yes.
Correct. So it wouldn't be something that we would do. We would wait for the rulings or the case law that comes out for us to then go forth after those.
Absolutely.
Rulings. Talking about different laws in itself, we had a question from the community about why aren't you issuing citations to California cars that are invading Arizona vehicle registration and sales tax recoupment? Person states that there's many, many, many plates parked in residential lots for months, and yet there's no citations given.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, I'm sure that there are cars, throughout Arizona and multiple states that are from different states. Arizona imports a great number of winter visitors, tourists that come into the state for months on end, whose primary residents are still in other states. And this question is about California. As long as your primary residence is in California, you can spend months on end here during our beautiful weather, and you don't have to register your vehicle in Arizona because that's your primary residence is still in California.
So what does primary residence mean? We have a statute here in Arizona that kind of defines it. It's 28-2001. So without getting
you had
into
to have looked that up.
I did look it up. I actually phoned a friend. I called one of our experts on, and they kind of told me about that because I'm not going to have that off the top of my head. But there is full layout of what is the definition of a residence. So if you're looking to understand what that is, that's available for them.
Right. Well, great. And that's a way to support me, Sarge. That's very good with the actual statute number. So yeah. And the other component of that question is that my folks are out there, our patrol officers are out there. They actually have to have a reason to stop you. They have to have reasonable suspicion or probable cause to search you. I'm sorry, to stop you and to search you. You just a car parked in a parking lot with a California plate does not fulfill either one of those. And so if there's a reason to make a traffic stop, then we determine are you a resident of Arizona, et cetera. So there was another component, I think, of that question, which making sure that we're citing drivers that cause collisions.
Collisions, correct.
Yeah, we are doing that. If you cause a collision, you're getting a citation. I'm not really sure on that one if there's a specific example from this particular citizen who wrote in if we didn't give somebody a citation, but typically if you cause a collision, we're writing a citation.
And most of the time, I can't speak for every single officer out there, but we understand that collisions are some of the most traumatic experiences that anybody can go through. They're very high speed. You invest a lot of money into these vehicles, and now it's damaged. So there's a lot of emotion that comes with it.
Definitely.
I know for my sake, a lot of the times when we don't want to give you a citation, it's not something that we take joy in
and it's expensive.
It's really expensive, but we always made sure to explain the citation, why there's a citation associated to a collision, and it's related to a traffic infraction. It's not related to who's at fault, who did what. We're determining, was there a law that was violated in order to issue that citation in itself.
Yeah.
The civil courts and the civil matters can deal with the rest of it, but we kind of have to take what's in our legal realm in order to talk about it when it happens.
Good points.
So it seems to be a lot of traffic-related issues that the citizens tend to have. This one relates to, hey, maybe the chief, you specifically, can you direct some traffic enforcement on Pima Road at Pinnacle Peak area? I guess I haven't done the research on it, but there may have been a fatal that was there a few months ago, but the community member feels that there's still a lot of racing going on.
Absolutely. And they're right. There is. I actually get this question a lot, and we've directed a lot of enforcement activity to Scottsdale Road and Pima Road north of the 101 because it's a really great straightaway with not a lot of lights in between. And so we have a lot of enforcement going on out there. We have our photo radar section out there, the towers, the vans. I think the last time I checked, and this was last week, I think our photo radar program has issued more than 14,000 citations, and the speeds are insane. So I want our public to know that we recognize that, and so we've increased. We have the photo radar towers out there now on the weekends. We pull of the data, and what the photo radar program is showing us is just an explosion of speeds over 90 and 100 miles an hour.
That's incredible.
And so, and it's all over the city. So any great straightaway, we're seeing a lot of very high speeds, and we've had multiple fatal collisions due to street racing and due to excessive speeds. So we are out there writing a lot of citations. The photo enforcement section is out there cranking out a lot of citations to try to get people to slow down. But it's a balancing act, because there's a greater reality that I still have my patrol officers in all of the areas, the 4 different districts in the city, are still responding to calls for service, and in their what we call their free time, their available time, then they conduct traffic enforcement, and then our traffic enforcement section is spending a lot of time doing traffic enforcement.
And that's perfect that you brought that up. Speaking with our traffic enforcement section, they did let us know that there is a number that the citizens of the community can call in to let us know about these type of matters. That number is 480-312 CARS, C-A-R-S. And that will go to a direct voicemail that our traffic enforcement session listens to and writes down major problem areas that we can get a little bit more visibility out there or do some more enforcement. So that is available for anybody that has any kind of concerns.
Did you have the one written down too?
I did have that
memorize
one
that one.
No, that one's on my piece of paper here. Another aspect that we learned about was, say you're in a community and maybe the speed limit doesn't seem right for the area. Well, our traffic engineering department of the city handles those analysis on it. Correct. Mm-hmm. So you can contact them via our website, going to Scottsdale EZ on our actual website and let them know, hey, I think there should be a speed bump here. Speed limits seem to be just a little bit too high, and they will do their analysis on it as well.
It's great. It's good info. I know a lot of people say, hey, can I get a roundabout? Can I do speed tables or speed bumps? And so typically the answer is
no. We did have a question recently about speed traps.
Oh, boy.
And I got to let you know, the city of Scottsdale does not participate in speed traps, correct?
Correct. We are not trying to trap anyone. We are doing speed enforcement, and that's all about safety.
Right.
And so we get away from that idea of a trap. We're not trying to trap anybody. We're trying to monitor traffic to be as safe as possible, because I hate to be so cliche. It's the old adage, speed kills, and it really does.
Okay, this is our last question before we get to our special guest here.
Yay, I'm excited.
It kind of came up just recently. Chief, why don't you have any complaint forms available to the public? Or seriously, are you just hindering a lawful complaint process?
Yeah, I know that was a big thing last week, and I think we had a First Amendment audit. And for those in our listening audience that don't understand what a First Amendment audit or haven't heard of that, it's when regular citizens will come forward and videotape officers on a traffic stop or come into one of our facilities and ask questions that they believe should be answered in a certain way. And so we had that recently, and one of those issues was about a First Amendment auditor asking or telling my folks that, hey, your policy says that you have a written complaint form, and that's not true. Our policy does not say that. Our policy is that we will take an internal affairs complaint or any complaint at all. It can be, you can call us. You can go on our website and fill out a complaint on any one of the officers. You can ask to speak to a sergeant, and you're going to get to speak to a sergeant. We'll write it down for you. If you have issues where you can't see as well or can't write as well, one of my police aides can write it down for you at a station. So we want to be as open and transparent as possible, but we got away from a standardized form or written complaint form many years ago and opted for an online version, a telephone version. You can send us a letter. You can send us something in the mail. We want to make it as easy as possible. And if, like I said, if there are issues related to how you write or you can't see, you can't read, we'll write it down for you. And so we want to make every opportunity available. If there's a complaint, there's an issue, you want to get something in front of me, in front of internal affairs, we're going to make.
Fantastic. Chief, these have been great questions from the community. We look forward to having many, many more in the future.
Now for the best part of the show, our very first guest. I'm tremendously excited to welcome Councilwoman Tammy Caputi to our very first show. And Tammy, if you would, we can just kind of talk about you. And
my favorite topic.
Yeah. But I think Kevin wants to ask the first question, don't you, Kevin?
I do. I absolutely do.
Of course, also, I'm honored to be here, and being the first guest is amazing. Thank you so much for having me here.
So it's not every day you wake up and say, you know what? I want to do public service. I love what it is, but there's a lot of process and procedures to get into it. So what really drew you to public service?
I have always been a person that believes that you cannot just sit on the sidelines and complain. You've got to jump in and do the work.
Sure.
And so to me, this made perfect sense. I really have a problem with people who throw stones from the outside. I feel like if you've got complaints about how things are working, you should join in and do what you can to change the world. And I know it sounds incredibly cliche, but I've always been that kind of person. I have 3 daughters, and I really feel determined to leave them with a better world. And I also say all the time, you have to see it to be it. I really feel strongly about modeling good behavior, not just for my children, but for everyone in our community. And I felt that I could be a good role model, and here I am. I was on the Development Review Board for 3 years, loved it far more than I ever expected. I originally thought that the municipal items would be boring or, that it just wouldn't be exciting for me. Taking a look at building, deciding on heights and densities and colors and setbacks and step backs,
Right.
but it was amazingly interesting and exciting. I got completely drawn into it, realized that I was actually changing lives from the dais on Development Review Board.
Yeah.
And decided that we needed to step up and have a bigger voice. Ran for city council, and here I am.
So that was with the city of Scottsdale that you did that
Yes.
for, and so Scottsdale just kind of, it's always been ingrained in you, like this is the greatest place to be, right?
This is the greatest place to be. I've lived here for over 20 years. I grew up in Boston. I came to Scottsdale on a vacation, and I'm sure a lot of residents have the same story. Completely fell in love with it and pretty much never left. I went back to Boston to go to graduate school and then moved right back out to my family's dismay. Really haven't looked back.
That's great. And there's no snow. Well, I guess we did have snow
We
a
did
couple
have
years
snow,
ago.
Yeah. A couple inches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But are you glad that, I mean, our weather's a lot different, so much better.
I love the weather, and not just the weather, but the terrain. I mean, I say all the time, you can be, wake up on a Saturday morning, be out on a mountain bike in the trails,
Right.
20 minutes from my house. I can be on the lake, on Bartlett Lake on a paddleboard, again, 20 minutes from my house, drive home, change, and then go downtown and have a completely different experience all in the same day. It's amazing. I'm always grateful to be here. I've said it a million times. It feels like I'm on a vacation every day of my life here. I've never lost that feeling.
Oh, it's so fun.
Yeah, it's great. Well, I, for one, it's going to be my shameless plug, but since you came to the council in January, you've just been a great supporter, not just of the citizenry and what we have going on in a very vibrant city, but you've also been a great supporter of the police department, public safety as a whole. And so you and I have had a number of conversations and spent some time together. So it's one of the main reasons why I wanted you as the first guest. So really appreciate all of that. Now let's get into, I like to ask questions related to how you see things related to the police department. So what expectations do you have of public safety kind of in the 21st century with what's going on in the world?
It's a great question. First of all, the fact that you even have a community engagement section is amazing. I can't say enough good things about it.
Thank you.
And that's what makes the Scottsdale PD different, I think. I mean, that's sort of what myself and others expect of police departments in this century, that you're going to communicate internally and externally, as you mentioned, with the citizens, that you're going to be available to them, that you're going to be a human being, right? I think a lot of people put police in this scary box.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, you and I have had so many conversations. To me, you're just Jeff, and you're cool.
Right. You heard that. I'm cool. She said I'm cool.
Fun to hang out
Yes, sir,
with.
whatever.
A regular person, right? And I think the community does better when we have a good relationship with our police department.
Agreed.
And I think the Scottsdale PD does a great job of that. I have an expectation that you're going to reach out to the community and that, and develop a relationship with them, and that it's going to come back in the other direction as well. The PD just put on a orientation for the council about a week ago, and that greatly exceeded my expectations.
Awesome.
I mean,
that's great to hear.
You put us through all of the different things that the police department is working on, brought it down to a personal level, explained all the sorts of programs that you're working on, which I think the general public would love to know about too. I've tried to post it a bit on social media, but these are great things. The more we can demystify the police department for the public, the better off everybody is.
Absolutely.
We're all community members.
Absolutely. Great.
So speaking on that topic, the community members in itself, what is the most things that you hear from our citizens just about our police department or public safety in itself in Scottsdale?
It's a great question. So I'll start with a joke, which I don't usually do. I'm not really a funny person. But Chief Rodbell said during a training I did many years ago that he could cut down most of the crime in the city of Scottsdale if he could just get people to close their garage doors.
That's absolutely
that always
right.
resonated for me, because we are very fortunate to live in a community in which we really don't have a huge amount of major crime situations. And so a lot of communications I get from the residents are about quality of life issues,
Sure.
Tons of emails and calls about noisy neighbors, short-term rental issues, speeding, traffic, trash, homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's more quality of life issues. I very rarely get the calls or emails about something super serious. And I think that probably is a challenge for your department, that you have to go from taking care of all the sort of first world problems, the simple, oh my gosh, my neighbor's being super annoying, all the way over to crisis intervention, domestic violence, and the normal, more serious police issues.
Totally. I think it's so fascinating to me, and it has been for going on 27 years, that we will have shootings in the downtown around some of our clubs. We'll have a homicide. We have our domestic violence is up 30%. Our aggravated assaults are up 68%. Part 1 crimes are up significantly. But that's not what you hear. That's not what that's not what the citizens are complaining about. Because by and large, you're right. We are a pretty safe city, but we have all of the crime, those type of activities like any major city. But that's not what our citizens tend to complain to you or to me about. It's about traffic. It's about noisy neighbors. It's about noise from coming from the clubs in the downtown. It's littering. I mean, it's anything. Lately it's been a lot of complaints about the exploding numbers of homeless in our city. But fairly. It's not very often that the complaints are about the major crime that does and is going on. It's about those quality of life issues. For me, the next question is, and we kind of talked about it. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do the council orientation really speaks to this question is, how do you think the events nationally that are going on nationally affect public safety and the city of Scottsdale locally?
I think that in this past year, the events that are happening nationally have elevated the conversation and the awareness of issues that we never really addressed locally. And I think that's been really important. Issues have been raised to the national level that we've never talked about before, and they have trickled all the way down to us here in Scottsdale. And the fact that, I said as I started, you've got a community engagement section, right? We spent the day with the police department, and we talked about principles of policing, de-escalation, use of force, fair and impartial police training, crisis intervention. These are things most people never talked about before this year, before it was brought into the national spotlight.
Right.
So now we're all very aware of it, and we're using these terms like they're everyday terms, right? And we're getting emails and calls from the citizenry asking you what you're doing to mitigate issues of police violence and force, and the whole conversation has shifted all the way down to our city level. And I think it's really great, back to what you were saying in the beginning, it's all about communication. Yeah. I think the most important thing for our police department is to engage with the citizens and have the citizens understand that you're here for them to engage with as well.
I think it's so interesting, and I'll say something that on its face might sound controversial, but when I look back at the pandemic and civil unrest and social unrest, there are some good things that come out of that. We tend to, I think, insulate ourselves in life and move forward without a lot of deep and meaningful dialogue. And so when you have things like the pandemic and questions about, is this unconstitutional, mask mandates, businesses being closed, school board meetings being closed down, or council being closed down during that time period, and then civil and social unrest based on behaviors of individual officers, other places, well, that creates opportunity for us to have great conversation. And you and I have had a number of lunch conversations where we wind up delving into some very significant issues. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this in this podcast or this outreach, or creating new groups within the organization that are about community outreach, because we want the tough conversation. And
we want them locally. Yes. I think we're doing such a better job locally of managing these conversations than they are at the national level. Right?
Agreed. I have people who want to talk about, they'll say, hey, can we meet? I meet them, and my assistant will schedule them for an hour, and I usually like to say, okay, the first 5 minutes, let's talk about the national issues going on in law enforcement. But after that 5 minutes, let's have a real honest discussion about what we're doing in the Scottsdale Police Department to make things better. Yep. Are we perfect? And I'll get plenty of comments below, in a DM or whatever, that say, no, you're not doing it. I'm having this problem. I get that. I want to know those things because I have a genuine desire for us to be better, but for us to communicate better, to be more professional.
Yeah.
And those are about these hard conversations.
Me too. I will respond to anyone in the community that reaches out in a respectful way to me and wants to have a conversation about something complicated.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, once you chat and talk and get to know them and address their issues, it has a positive outcome. And
Absolutely.
I think that's the beauty of being at the local level. You can really have these one-on-one conversations and move the needle. And I also think that it's so important that as leaders, we model this behavior. And it's easier to do at the local level. You know, we have to be better. We have to show people how we can. I mean, on council, I made this comment last night. We can sit there on the dais as 7 people with 7 different opinions, but we get to a consensus by the end, more or less, most of the times.
Right.
And in a civil way. And it's really important to me that we model that behavior for our citizens, and and the police department does it as well. You know, it's up to us to be the leaders.
Boy, Tammy, I think you really hit the nail on the head there. We talk a lot about, and in the past, we talked a lot about this idea about civility and civil discourse. And one of the hard things coming out of the pandemic and some of the social unrest from 2020 and into 2021 is I think that civil discourse has been a casualty of the pandemic and social unrest. And so that's one of the things that I think has been disheartening is, and I mentioned earlier, whether it be a school board meeting or a council meeting or just in a conversation, we seem to have gotten away from civil discourse, and we need to come back to that. It's okay to disagree, but let's disagree and then share, opinions on one side or the other and see if we can't come to some type of consensus, because the only way, this is more on you than it is me, because I work for you and my job is enforcement, but your job in governance is, can we come to a consensus? Can we find some middle ground so that we can move forward as a community and a society? And in that respect, I think you're killing it.
And we're a golden rule city. I've said this so many times. It's not just words on a paper. If it's just in the general plan or in our city documents, that's great, but we have to live these values too.
Yes.
It's so important. I think
Agreed.
our motto is simply better service for a world-class community.
Yes.
Like, let's make that happen. Let's not just talk about it.
Yes, absolutely.
So what are some of the challenges that you see facing the city within the next 5 years?
Oh, a really easy question for Max.
That's why I'm here.
I know. Well, everyone has a different idea about this. And when I was thinking about this before coming in, I was trying to decide, the typical things people were going to say. And I'm trying to think bigger, because I think that's my job on council.
Right.
When I look out 5 years, I think the biggest challenge is really competition from other cities in the Valley. I feel very strongly that we are in a wonderful place in Scottsdale. We've touched upon this already. We're doing great on every possible metric, but sometimes that causes a bit of complacency, and I feel very strongly that we cannot stand still. We have to keep growing and adapting. The world's changing around us. Scottsdale's not an island. We're special, but we have to figure out a way to stay special and still move forward. There's a huge population influx into the Valley in general. Mm-hmm. And so we really do have to figure out a way how to accommodate this growth that fits into our city without falling prey to this, okay, we're all here now, we're going to close the door. Right? We've got to figure out a way how to move and grow into the future and still make our city Scottsdale, but deal with all of these pressures that are going to come. And we have to do it in a civil way, right? So we're always having this conversation about being a golden rule city, providing for others, having attainable housing, but they can't just be words. They have to be actions. And in order to have these things, we have to move our city forward into the future. And I think that's our biggest challenge. How do we get there? And how do we make sure that everyone's on the same page with that?
Right. I mean, Chief's been here now, you said 27, right?
27, right.
So I'm only at 14, and in my entire time, I've seen an incredible change just from going to different districts, working in detectives.
Absolutely.
And I can imagine, as council members, what you guys are going through as far as the innovation and the different businesses that are coming in. And I mean, our downtown is so vibrant every weekend. We love it. We love seeing people enjoying Scottsdale. It's kind of what makes us this fun destination city to come to. So for you guys in the city council to kind of envision, it's almost impossible, but you guys find these ways to innovate and bring in more and more and more. So it's just been fantastic to see.
Change is scary,
Mm-hmm.
but we're looking forward. We really can't just stare at our feet. We have to look ahead.
Right.
And back to the why did I run for council? I'm the youngest member on council. I have 3 young children. I'm looking ahead.
Right.
And I think it's really important that we take that long view. We just spent the last 6 months, our first 6 months on council, putting together our general plan, which is a long-term 10 to 20-year out vision for our city. And I think we forget that we have to keep looking ahead. What does it look like? How do we accommodate change? How do we move forward into the future? We're not writing this plan for us. We're writing it for our kids.
Absolutely.
And we always forget that. And so I think the biggest challenge is let's not look down at the ground. Let's take a deep breath, see what our city looks like in the future, and do the things that we need to do to get there in the most positive way. And I'm sorry, I got to keep rambling for a minute.
Absolutely, yeah.
And this question of sense of place comes up a lot on our council conversations. Scottsdale is a wonderful place. One of the answers I gave you a minute ago is that you can wake up in the morning, be on a mountain bike trail, 2 hours later, be downtown having lunch in a cool, hip spot. I mean, Scottsdale is awesome and varied, and we have great open spaces. 30% of our city has been 25% preserved in perpetuity, right? We've got amazing desert trails to hike and to bike. And we've also got this cool, vibrant downtown scene. And we know we're in Scottsdale. People always are asking this, what happens as we grow? Will we lose our sense of place? It's hard for me to imagine that. I mean, cities can maintain their authenticity and still move into the future. When I fly back to Boston to visit, I feel like I'm in Boston, even though there are tall buildings and it's modern and you know you're in Boston. And when you go to London, you know you're in London. When you come to Scottsdale, you know you're in Scottsdale. It's hot. We have lots of awesome hiking trails. We have lakes. We have biking trails. We have a cool, vibrant city. We've got it all. It's Southwestern. It's beautiful and it's modern, but we also have a Western feel. I feel that we've done a fantastic job of capturing this, and I look forward to seeing what the city looks like in the next several years.
I was ready to just stand up right there and start waving the Scottsdale flag.
Right?
That was awesome. Yeah.
I'm an ambassador for the city. That's my job.
All right, so Tammy, it's been almost 6 months now since you took the new seat. So how's it been? Are you still what drove you into the position? Is it still driving you? Is it what you thought it would be?
More. I made that comment that I felt that I was changing people's lives with those silly decisions on Development Review Board.
Yeah.
I feel that exponentially now. It is such an amazing feeling and humbling to sit on the dais with 6 other people in the city, knowing that the decisions we come up with are actually going to impact people's lives. I'm incredibly humbled by it. I love this job. In my day job, I run my own business, and I'm used to wearing a whole bunch of different hats, jumping from one task to another, and I've kind of gotten good at that. But I've gotten good at it, right? So it's a little bit on autopilot. Scottsdale City Council has been that to the 100th degree. So now in my 50s here, I've got this brand new job that's in a sense the same. I'm constantly wearing a million different hats. I've got to jump from topic to topic to topic all day long, brand new topics. I'm kind of drinking from the fire hose, trying to get up to speed, and it's endlessly fascinating to me. I mean, I can be on the phone with a resident or a fellow council member or, a zoning attorney or a developer or the city manager or the police chief at 11 at night, still worrying about, right?
Yes.
Still worrying about a problem and still interested in solving it and still thinking about it. Up late at night, how can I fix this? How can I do that? How can I get more up to speed on this particular topic so that I can make a better decision for the citizens? It's exhausting, but it's so invigorating. Yeah. I literally can't get enough of it. I feel like I'm just high on the awesomeness of this job.
It's I'm always, I think I drive my almost 700 employees in the police department crazy because I'm always trying to weave in an idea or a leadership moment. And you just hit on one that I think is so important and is really behind a lot of your success. And that is, I think great leaders, they possess a certain level of humility. You talked about how humbling the experience has been. And so it's when we lose that humility that we become ineffective. And so no matter what level you're in, I mean, a council member of a large city, a vibrant city with an international reputation, or a police chief or a CEO of a major company, that bringing that level of humility, I think, is important to continue to move forward as a great leader. And you possess that level of humility, which I think is important to move this city forward. And so I'm always preaching that to whether it be to a sergeant, a supervisor, a lieutenant, a manager, a commander, or a director in this organization, is that you have to possess the requisite amount of true humility, not faux humility, but true humility to recognize that you're still on this path and on this journey and there's a lot to learn, but I want to stand and I want to serve in council, or I want to stand as the police chief and lead well to provide exceptional service to the citizens. And so I just really hit on that when you mentioned about that humbling experience and being humble, that humility is so important. And I just think that you personify that idea. So thank you.
You're welcome. That's a great point. And I think people have a tendency to see these positions, council member, police chief, as being glamorous. And as we know,
it's very lonely.
It's lonely. It's thankless. It's long, hard hours. It's very little pay, right? I mean, you've really got to love the job to want to do it.
Yes. So Kevin, I think you were gonna wrap up with some rapid fire questions for Councilwoman Caputi and I. Yes.
Yeah. So these are just some of the fun questions that we kind of want to get your take on it. So it's like, don't overthink them.
Okay.
They're just super. Like, let's get to know you a little bit better. You said you're a business owner. So imagine if your business was selling hot chocolate and that's all you did. How would you do that in our summer?
Wow, that went a totally different direction than I thought it was going to go. Selling hot chocolate.
I thought we were going to talk about shooting.
I know. How would you sell hot chocolate?
How would you sell hot chocolate? It's kind of one of those, it's going to melt. Or it's too hot, or what do we do in summer here?
Is that for me, or is that for Tammy?
I think Jeff should take that one.
Yeah.
That's a really Let me say that I sell light fixtures and electrical supplies for a living, and I always joke that it's a difficult job, of course, but it's also fairly easy because who's ever going to say, you know what, we're just not going to light this building up?
Right.
No lights this time, right? So hot chocolate's a little different because I'm not sure it's one of those items you have to have. Plus, I don't drink it, so it would be a hard thing to convince someone else to.
Are you ready? Here's my marketing strategy.
Go.
Life is bitter. Get something sweet. Here's a hot chocolate.
And 125.
Yeah, he's way better. He's way better at
there's
this.
there's just such great sweetness and chocolatey goodness and marshmallows in there. Come on, you see it. Look at Starbucks or Dutch Brothers or Black Rock Coffee or any of these places that there's a line through the drive-thru. Now, yeah, I get it. People are getting iced coffee. I'll make you an ice hot chocolate, or get some sweetness today to start out your day.
Yeah, I think you got to own it. I'm thinking about, Experience Scottsdale they've been doing this campaign about the heat here, and it's hot. Maybe you just own it. Like, you know what? It's just hot. Let's get into it.
I'm telling you, I got my, it's hot outside.
Yeah.
We're hotter.
Right.
Get Scottsdale hot chocolate.
I love it. It's a dry heat.
I love the radio voice. The radio voice just really came in there and really run deep on there.
Maybe we should sell it in powder, right?
There you go. Condensed.
That's the thing.
That's
all right,
perfect.
Next.
All right. If you could have any superpower, what would it be and why?
I'm going to defer to Chief again.
So I will tell you, and I'll tell the audience that I kind of have a leg up on this because I'm a Marvel fan. I watched all the Marvel movies in chronological order, and I did an interview with a young man who was for a class at ASU, was in the criminal justice program, and he asked me this same question. So fortunately, I had apparently way too much time in my hands when I was on the fireside that short period of time.
That's right.
But if I could have any superpower, it would be teleportation. And not just regular teleportation from place to place, because I'd love to say, hey, Leia, Kevin, Tammy, let's, after this podcast, let's have lunch together. And let's go have lunch in Venice and teleport to Venice. But not only is place to place, it would be from time period to time period.
That's awesome.
So that way I could teleport to a different time period. And I want to be in Scottsdale or in Phoenix and have to have lunch in a diner in 1950.
Now, would you hold your hands out and spin a gold ring like Doctor Strange and wear a cape? Because that's essentially...
Why do we have to go in that direction?
Oh,
can't we just all hold hands and I teleport us and then we go?
Okay, I like that. No capes though, right? No capes.
No capes, and moreover, no tights.
No tights. We can't do tights at all. Okay.
All right. Well, I'm literally sitting here drawing a blank, which honestly never happens to me. Ask the chief. I love to talk, but I will use that question as an opportunity to tell you something else about myself.
Sure.
The reason I can't come up with anything is because I don't watch television.
That
So
could be a
I'm
very,
sitting
very
here-
good thing.
I'm sitting here running through all the superheroes going, what even is a superpower? Like, I feel like I bring my superpowers to life every day, right? I'm a 5 foot tall, petite female trying to change the world. And my superpower is staying positive and looking forward and being my genuine self every day. I always say that that's what makes me. That's what usually attracts people to me. And that is my superpower. And so I'm just going to keep bringing it.
So you have real life, and we just kind of imagine
That was
things.
totally a way better, more introspective example than my teleportation. No.
Because I like regenerating powers, but
Yeah.
I'll go with yours because I actually like that way better.
Now I'm actually feeling
But
poorly
Chief,
about myself.
I will join you in that teleported lunch any day. Are you?
Okay, so our last one. If you could choose one song to play every time you walked into a room for the rest of your life, what song would you choose?
Last Call to Heaven by the White Buffalo. Go look it up or listen to it.
Okay, well, first of all, I don't want to do anything every single day for the rest of my life because that sounds like a nightmare of Groundhog Day, which often every day feels like. Embarrassing again, insight into me. Anything from the 80s.
Yes, woo! The 80s!
Embarrassing. I have all the 80s music.
As long as we get the hair bands back, right?
Right?
Right. Flock of Seagulls.
Oh my God. I work out every day, as most people who know me know, and the music playing in my ears is always embarrassing 80s music.
It's like
That's
Rat,
right.
Motley Crue,
I
Def
grew up
Leppard.
in the 80s. I can't lose it.
Twisted Sister.
Right? The best.
Okay, wait, maybe Duran Duran.
I'm very partial to Indigo Girls, too.
For the audience, it's Tammy and I are about the same age, so yeah.
Yeah, it helps.
Grew up in the 80s.
If you need to, you guys can look those up just like I will later.
We're not that old.
Wait, we're all the same age.
Anything
that's
for
exactly
me, the
what he
White
said.
Buffalo, anything,
Okay.
that's my jam.
That's great. Well, we appreciate your time. Thank you for stopping by, coming to our first podcast. And if anyone has any questions, again, for the chief or for anything that we're doing here, just make sure you check us out on social media. Visit us on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook at ScottsdalePD and on Instagram at Scottsdale_police.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you, Tammy.
having me.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.